Mindfulness, a space where we share insights, practices, and stories that help you live with presence, compassion, and clarity. Today, let's explore the art of transforming suffering, not by running from it, but by walking through it with open eyes and an open heart. Pain is not the enemy. It's the stern teacher who shows up uninvited, often at the worst possible time, carrying lessons we never thought we needed. As Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese Zen master, once said, "No mud, no lotus." Without the mud of suffering, the lotus of understanding cannot bloom. I remember a time when my own heart felt like it had been hollowed out. A loss I didn't see coming left me staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., wondering if life would ever feel whole again. In those moments, the temptation is to numb, distract, or run, anything to avoid sitting with the ache. But I discovered that the more I turned away from my pain, the louder it knocked. The moment I finally sat with it, like an uncomfortable guest I couldn't shoo away, something shifted. The pain softened, just enough for me to breathe again. American Zen teacher Jack Kornfield often speaks about tending the wounds rather than trying to erase them. This doesn't mean we indulge in suffering or make it our identity. It means we meet it with the same gentle attention we'd give a frightened child. When we bring mindfulness to our pain, simply noticing the sensations in the body, the stories in the mind, the emotions swirling within, we create space for healing. Science is catching up to what the great spiritual teachers have known for centuries. Studies in neuroscience show that mindful awareness can literally rewire the brain, reducing the grip of negative emotions and increasing our capacity for empathy. One study from Harvard found that just 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation can shrink the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, and strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation. But transforming suffering isn't about becoming invincible or pretending nothing hurts. It's about allowing ourselves to be human, beautifully, vulnerably human, and using every hardship as raw material for growth. When my grief became too heavy, I remembered the image Thich Nhat Hanh often used, holding your suffering like a mother holds her crying baby. Not pushing it away, not judging it, just cradling it until it begins to calm. Life will hand us mud, over and over again. The invitation is to see what kind of lotus we can grow from it. When we practice this, even in small ways, we begin to realize that every wound, every scar, carries within it the possibility of awakening. And perhaps one day, we will look back and see that our deepest pain was also our greatest teacher. Pain has a way of making the world feel smaller. It can shrink our vision until all we see is the hurt right in front of us. But as Thich Nhat Hanh taught, mindfulness is the art of making our world wide again, of opening space around the pain so it doesn't consume us. I once heard American Zen teacher Pema Chodron describe suffering like being caught in quicksand. The instinct is to thrash, to fight our way out, but that only makes us sink deeper. The wiser path is counterintuitive, to slow down, breathe, and find stable ground beneath us. That stable ground is awareness, the ability to see what's happening without getting lost in it. There was a winter in my life when the cold wasn't just outside, it was inside me too. Every day felt gray. I tried to distract myself with work, with social media, with anything that would keep me from feeling the heaviness. But the more I avoided it, the heavier it became. One day, I decided to simply sit and breathe for 10 minutes. I noticed the tension in my chest, the tightness in my throat, the way my hands curled slightly without me realizing it. That simple act of noticing didn't make the pain disappear, but it made it bearable. And from there, life began to feel just a little more spacious. Modern psychology mirrors this wisdom. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, widely practiced in the US, encourages people to make room for difficult emotions instead of trying to control them. This doesn't mean we like our pain. It means we stop treating it as an intruder to be evicted and start seeing it as a messenger. Sometimes the message is about boundaries we've crossed, relationships we've outgrown, or dreams we've neglected. Thich Nhat Hanh would often invite his students to invite the bell, to pause, breathe, and come back to the present moment. In those pauses, he'd remind us we can touch peace even in the middle of struggle. That peace doesn't deny the storm. It simply gives us shelter while the winds pass. In America, Many mindfulness practitioners, from Jon Kabat-Zinn to Sharon Salzberg, have brought this teaching into hospitals, prisons, schools, and workplaces. They've shown that we don't have to wait for perfect conditions to find peace. We can plant it right in the middle of our messy, complicated lives. And when we do, something changes. The pain is still there, but it no longer owns us. Slowly, we start to realize that suffering isn't a life sentence. It's a doorway. And when we walk through it with mindful attention, we may find not just relief, but a deeper connection to life itself. A life that is tender, fleeting, and worth living fully, even with its scars. Some wounds heal on their own with time. Others need our gentle attention, like a plant that won't bloom unless it's watered. Thich Nhat Hanh often reminded his students that suffering is not enough, meaning we are not meant to live in pain forever. Instead, we can transform it into understanding and compassion, both for ourselves and for others. I remember meeting an American veteran who had taken a mindfulness retreat with Jon Kabat-Zinn. He told me that before the retreat, he couldn't sleep without nightmares. Every sound was a trigger, every shadow a reminder of the war he'd left behind. But during those silent days of practice, he learned to notice his breath, to feel his feet touching the ground, to place his hand gently over his heart when memories became too heavy. It didn't erase the pain, he said, but it gave me a way to hold it without drowning in it. This is the power of mindful awareness. It doesn't erase the past. It changes our relationship to it. Instead of being dragged around by every painful memory or emotion, we begin to see them as passing weather, storms that may rage, but that we don't have to become. As Sharon Salzberg, one of America's most beloved meditation teachers, puts it, "You are not the storm. You are the sky." There's also something quietly revolutionary about realizing that our suffering is not unique. Yes, our circumstances are personal, but the human experience of pain is universal. When we open to that truth, we stop feeling so alone. In Zen practice, there's a phrase, "This is the human condition." It's not a dismissal. It's an embrace. It means welcome. You belong here too, even with your pain. Neuroscience gives us even more encouragement. Brain imaging studies have shown that when people practice compassion meditation, sending wishes of well-being to themselves and others, activity increases in brain regions associated with empathy and emotional regulation. Over time, this practice doesn't just make us kinder, it makes us more resilient in the face of stress. I once tried this with a difficult memory of my own. At first, my mind resisted. Why would I send kindness to a part of myself that had made mistakes? But I remembered Thich Nhat Hanh's advice. You can't pour water on a fire with more fire. Meeting my pain with harshness would only inflame it. So I kept breathing. I imagined holding that memory like a small, frightened child. I whispered silently, "It's okay. You are safe now." And something softened. Not overnight, not dramatically, but enough that I could feel space where before there had only been tightness. Enough to remind me that every act of tenderness toward ourselves is also an act of courage. When we see our pain in this way, we begin to understand suffering is not just something to survive. It can be the very ground from which our deepest wisdom grows. There's a moment in healing when we realize we're no longer fighting the pain, we're listening to it. That's when transformation truly begins. Thich Nhat Hanh often said, "Listen to your suffering with compassion, and it will tell you what you need to know." It's not an easy invitation. Listening to pain means we have to slow down, and in a world that prizes speed, slowing down can feel unnatural, even threatening. I remember a mindfulness workshop in California led by Jack Kornfield. A woman shared that after losing her husband, she kept herself busy for months, volunteering, working late, taking on new projects, until one morning she woke up feeling completely numb. She realized she had been running from her grief. During the workshop, Jack guided her through a short meditation, asking her to place her hand on her heart and say silently, "I'm here for you." She wept, not from the sadness alone, but from the relief of finally allowing herself to feel. This act of turning toward our pain is what psychologists call emotional approach coping. Research shows that when we acknowledge and process our feelings instead of avoiding them, we reduce long-term stress and even strengthen our immune system. It's a paradox. The more we welcome our pain, the less control it has over us. In American Zen circles, there's a teaching about radical acceptance, popularized by meditation teacher Tara Brach. It's the idea that we stop arguing with reality. We stop saying, this shouldn't be happening, and instead say, this is what's here right now, and I will meet it with kindness. This doesn't mean we approve of what happened or that we won't work to change our circumstances. It means we stop adding a second layer of suffering, the resistance, on top of the first. Thich Nhat Hanh often compared this to drinking a cup of tea. When we're fully present, we taste the warmth, the aroma, the moment itself. But if we're lost in regret or worry, the tea might as well be water. We miss it entirely. In the same way, when we are fully present with our suffering, we may discover subtle textures we hadn't noticed before. The way grief holds traces of love, the way fear carries a longing for safety, the way loneliness points to our capacity for connection. One of the most powerful things I've learned from both Eastern and Western mindfulness teachers is that transformation doesn't happen through force. It happens through gentle, steady attention. A gardener doesn't pull on the seedling to make it grow faster. They water it, give it sunlight, and trust the process. We can tend to ourselves in the same way, and over time, something remarkable happens. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes a teacher we can respect. It doesn't mean we want it back, but we can look it in the eye and say, you shaped me. You taught me to see more deeply. You helped me grow. Sometimes the transformation of suffering happens quietly, almost without us noticing. One day we wake up and realize the wound that used to consume our thoughts now feels lighter, like a scar that no longer aches in the rain. Thich Nhat Hanh often taught that healing is not a single event, but a continuous process, like waves smoothing a jagged stone over years. I once met a man at a retreat in Vermont led by Sharon Salzberg. He told me about a painful divorce that had left him feeling hollow. For months, he carried anger like a weight on his chest. But through daily meditation and loving kindness practice, he began sending gentle wishes not only to himself, but also, reluctantly at first, to his ex-wife. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be at peace. He didn't do it to reconcile. He did it to free himself from the prison of resentment. Over time, the sharpness dulled, replaced by a quiet gratitude for the lessons the relationship had brought. This is one of the most surprising gifts of mindful practice. It can turn even the hardest memories into sources of compassion. When we learn to see suffering as part of the shared human journey, our hearts expand. The pain doesn't disappear, but it no longer isolates us. Instead, it connects us to strangers, to friends, to every being who has ever struggled and loved and lost. Modern research backs this up. Studies in positive psychology show that people who engage in regular gratitude or compassion practices report higher levels of life satisfaction, even in the midst of hardship. Their brains adapt, creating new patterns that support resilience and empathy. It's as if the mind learns to look for the light without denying the darkness. Thich Nhat Hanh often compared this to growing a lotus from mud. The mud is thick, messy, and unavoidable, but it's also the very thing that nourishes the flower. Without the mud, there's no lotus. In the same way, our suffering can nourish qualities like patience, courage, and love, if we are willing to stay with it long enough to learn its lessons. One evening, during a silent retreat, I walked slowly around a small pond. The surface was still, reflecting the moon. I thought about my own wounds, the ones that had shaped me, the ones that still whispered in the background of my days. And for the first time, I didn't wish them away. I simply bowed to them, as you might bow to an old teacher. In that moment, I understood something deep. The goal is not to erase the past, but to let it become part of the wisdom we carry. Pain transforms us, not by breaking us, but by opening doors we didn't know were there. Doors that lead to understanding, connection, and a life lived more fully awake. There comes a point when we realize that transforming suffering isn't just about personal healing. It's about how we show up in the world. Thich Nhat Hanh taught that when we tend to our own pain with mindfulness, we naturally develop the capacity to hold the pain of others. This is the seed of true compassion. I once attended a talk by Jon Kabat-Zinn at a medical conference. He told the story of a nurse who practiced mindfulness during her shifts in a busy hospital ward. Every day, she encountered patients in deep distress, some facing terminal diagnoses, others wrestling with unbearable fear. Instead of hardening herself to cope, she practiced softening, Between patients, she would take 3 mindful breaths, silently saying, "This moment is fresh. This person is worthy of my full presence." Over time, she noticed she could listen more deeply, respond with greater kindness, and feel less drained at the end of the day. This is the ripple effect of healing. When we stop being at war with our own suffering, we stop projecting that war onto others. We become a place of refuge, a steady shore in someone else's storm. And in today's world, filled with noise, speed, and division, that kind of presence is a rare and powerful gift. American meditation teacher Tara Brach calls this the sacred pause, the moment we step back from automatic reactions and choose to respond with awareness. It could be as simple as pausing before snapping at a loved one, or taking a breath before replying to an email that stirs anger. These small pauses are not insignificant. They are the moments when compassion has a chance to speak louder than our pain. Science offers an encouraging perspective here, too. Research on emotional contagion shows that our inner states are remarkably infectious. A calm, grounded presence can influence those around us in measurable ways, lowering collective stress, fostering cooperation, and even improving physical health. In other words, by tending to our own suffering, we are also tending to the well-being of the community. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The best way to take care of the world is to take care of yourself." This isn't self-indulgence. It's the recognition that we can't pour from an empty cup. When our own hearts are nourished, we can offer genuine kindness without resentment or burnout. I think of a friend who, after years of struggling with anxiety, began practicing mindfulness meditation. She told me that while her anxiety still shows up, it no longer runs the show. More importantly, her relationships have changed. "I'm able to be there for people in a way I couldn't before," she said. "It's like I have more room inside me." That's the quiet magic of transforming suffering. It expands our capacity to love. It turns our pain into empathy, our wounds into bridges, and our private healing into a shared gift. And as we live this way, we discover that compassion, for ourselves and for others, is not the end of the journey. It is the path itself. The final step in transforming suffering is understanding that the journey never truly ends. Life will continue to bring both joy and pain, gains and losses, beginnings and endings. But once we have learned to meet suffering with mindfulness, we carry a different kind of confidence. Not the certainty that nothing will hurt us, but the trust that we can stay present through whatever comes. Thich Nhat Hanh often described this as walking in peace. It's not about escaping the storms of life, but about carrying an inner stillness that remains even when the winds howl. That stillness is cultivated breath by breath, moment by moment, through the practice of returning to ourselves with kindness. I once met a woman at a retreat in the mountains of Colorado, led by Jack Cornfield. She had survived a life-threatening illness and spoke about how, before her diagnosis, she lived in constant fear of what might go wrong. The illness stripped away that illusion of control, and strangely, it was a relief. Now, she said, "I wake up each day grateful just to be here. I don't waste as much time resisting life. I let it in, all of it." Her eyes shone with the kind of freedom that only comes from having walked through the fire and discovered you can still stand. This is the essence of transformation. The pain we once tried to push away becomes part of our wisdom. It deepens our connection to others, softens our judgments, and helps us see the preciousness of each passing moment. When we live this way, even the smallest things, the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of a cup of tea, the smile of a stranger, can feel like treasures. In American mindfulness communities, teachers like Sharon Salzberg, Tara Brach, and John Kabat-Zinn remind us that practice is not something we do only on a cushion or in a quiet retreat center. It's something we bring into our conversations, our work, our relationships, our moments of uncertainty. Every breath is an opportunity to return to presence. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, is a seed of healing. And so, if you take one thing from this journey, let it be this: your suffering is not wasted. It can become the soil from which understanding, compassion, and joy grow. You are not broken, you are becoming. Here on Mindfulness, we share these stories, practices, and reflections, not just to inspire, but to remind you that you are never alone in this path. Whatever you are facing, there is a way to hold it with gentleness, to let it teach you, and to walk forward with an open heart. May you find peace in your steps, courage in your heart, and the unshakable knowing that even in the mud, the lotus is already on its way.